it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today is probably one of my favorite techniques and so simple, which is always a bonus for me. There are not many things that you need for this, but the one thing that we do need, and this is fantastic to have on hand, there are so many techniques done with this ink, is a white pigment ink. Now I choose to have the Hero Arts Unicorn pigment ink. I have had the same white ink pad for a really long time. I do have a Reinker and I do re-ink it up, but yeah, it's pretty good. Then I'm going to use some VersaFine Clair pigment inks. Now these stamp beautifully, and this is the main reason that I'm going to be using these today in comparison with the other two inks that I pretty much have on hand. So pretty much I go with the VersaFine Clair, which is a pigment ink, Distress Oxides, which is a hybrid between pigment and dye, and then the Simon Hurley dye ink pads. These are pretty much the three that I have in my collection. And I just want to quickly show you the stamping, how these kind of stamp out normally. So these are the three of them, and I'll just kind of give you a close-up. So the Simon Hurley dye inks stamp nicely, pretty good. I would call this the second. Distress Oxides, in my opinion, are not necessarily designed for stamping, so they always come out a bit blotchy. And then the VersaFine Clair up the top is a really crisp, clean image. And for this case, that's what I'm after. So they all have different purposes, these inks, and they all probably do look fine, by the way. They all work fine. But the pigment inks are the ones that I choose when I want a really crisp image for stamping. Speaking of, I want to have an image that is solid today. So I'm choosing to go with these leaf clusters from Altenew. This is a favorite that I've used a lot. I'm using several different cardstocks today. I'm going to start off using a Kraft cardstock, and the one that I use is by Fawn. I just showed you the packaging just so that you can get an idea of what it looks like. Then all you need to do is take your solid stamp, and I'm going to stick with the same solid stamp here just for ease of stamping. I'm going to ink it up in white, then stamp down just like I normally would, and sometimes I give it like an extra second or two for the ink to really transfer. It's best not to hurry through your stamping, especially because I'm not using a stamping platform. So you want to give time for the ink to transfer, not a really long time, but just a second or two to get the ink on the paper. Of course, you can do this with a stamping platform if you need a hinge. However, honestly, I find it just as easy to do it just freehand with an acrylic block. Now, just for the first card, I'm choosing to go right around my design. And the white is going to show up pretty nicely, and it stamps out pretty nicely. Now, for this technique, all you need to do is use the same stamp, ink it up in some of the pigment ink, and then shift it so that there is a little shadow. You can see that there is some ink that has stamped darker, then there is some lighter pink ink, and that's the ink that has layered up on top of the white, and then there is some white where you have missed the kind of original stamping as well. So all you do is just shift it. It doesn't matter which direction you go. For my brain, I tend to go up and to the right just a little bit. But as I said, you can go down, left, right, up, doesn't matter. I just choose to go up and to the right, just like a couple of millimeters, not too far at all. And then you stamp down, and then that is going to leave that beautiful shadow off to the side where some of the ink is darker, and then some of it will be lighter where it is on top of the white pigment ink, and then some of it is going to stay white where you missed it. I love this technique. I think it is so effective. It is very easy to achieve. And I actually forgot to show you, but I stamped out all three. I might even pop a photo up on my Instagram. I stamped out all three using this technique in the Simon Hurley dye ink, in the oxide inks, and then in the VersaFine Clair, and they all work perfectly. So you don't have to layer a pigment ink with a pigment ink. You can layer the dye on top of the pigment ink too. Now I have a little have a happy day stamp here, and I'm actually going to ink this up using both colors just carefully, because I don't want to contaminate one ink pad with another, but this way I can have that kind of two-tone look because I've used these two colors on my background as well. This is the says have a happy day from the Spotlight Sayings from Pink and Main, and that's stamped beautifully. Again, pigment inks just stamp beautifully. These VersaFine Clairs are most definitely worth investing in if you really want an ink that is going to stamp beautifully, crisp, clean, and not kind of take time to fill in, not blotchy, all those things. It just stamps brilliantly straight away. It is worth bearing in mind that these stay wet for a little bit longer. They are perfect for embossing, but if that's not what you want to do, you just need to either heat set them or bear in mind that they're going to stay wet a little bit longer. That's how pigment inks work. The pigment inks sit on top of the paper rather than dye inks, which dye the paper and kind of settle in. So this time I thought I would do it on some light grey cardstock, and I have to speed this up a little bit. Obviously you've just watched me do one, so I just wanted to speed through the next one, but any colour basically other than white is going to work really well for this technique, and so I'm just choosing a light grey cardstock. I'm going to go with a bit of a different layout this time, so I've kind of gone heavy on the bottom left corner, a little bit lighter on the top right hand corner, and then again I'm going to use the Warm Breeze colour, the VersaFine clear inks, and just ink it up like I would normally, then hover it over top of my white image, and then because I can see through the acrylic block, I just need to move it up and to the right just a little bit. It doesn't have to be the same every time, it doesn't have to be perfect. I find that sometimes I kind of go a little bit more, sometimes I go a little bit less. It's not on purpose, but honestly it all looks perfectly fine. No one could tell that you were meant to go, you know, a millimeter to the left or a millimeter to the right. As long as you just try and offset it just a little bit. I love that beautiful darker shadow that it gives, and it kind of makes it look like you've got 3 ink colors there. So, and again, this is all just using one solid stamp, so you don't have a layering stamp, you don't have to do any of that, but yet it kind of gives that beautiful shadow technique, which I absolutely love. So I'm going to make sure I get all of mine just in the same color this time, and then keeping things really simple, I'm going to just use the same colored ink to ink up my Sending Big Hugs. And again, this is from the Spotlight Saying stamp set, same one. I've used this in lots of videos as well, but it's really good to reuse our supplies. This is how we get value for money, and that's what's so important to me when using my craft supplies, is that what we invest in is what I need to be using. So here I'm using the Tim Holtz trimmer. Please remember that when you are using this trimmer, you need to hold down that plastic guard to get a straight cut. I have heard and seen a few people kind of just hold the card, the panel, and then they cut down and it goes wonky. You definitely need to hold down that plastic guard, and that will keep your paper in place and not move at all. I've had the same experience. That's how I know, especially it's important to do that. I'm cutting off just a little bit so that I can create a little border for my cards here. I am going to use some multi-medium in the matte finish. That's what's inside these little glue bottles. And I'm going to pop these down onto some 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card bases. I went with white card bases because I think it really brings out that little bit of white shadow pigment ink there, just with our stamping. So I'll do the same for both of them, pop them down onto their card bases. You could dress these up a whole lot in so many different ways. I'm just showing you a couple of quick ways to do these cards. And obviously the designs are unlimited. There's everything that you could do out there. So I decided for one of them just to add a few little white Nuvo drops. Again, not introducing a new color at all, sticking with the white, nice and plain. I'm doing some little ones, some big ones, and then the other one I'm going to keep completely plain. But as I said, if you want to dress it up and keep going, you could add some gems. You could add, depending on who the recipient is, you could kind of go all out or leave it really plain and simple. So I decided to leave one plain and simple and then add some Nuvo drops to the other one. But anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this technique. This is honestly one of my absolute favorites because of the simplicity and because of the outcome. I just think this looks really stunning. So thank you so much for joining me. As usual, the supplies will be listed in the description box below this video. Down in the description too, I also have my mail address if you want to send me a card for snail mail, and I also have my email address in case you need to get hold of me. There are also a couple of different ways down there that you can support my channel if you're interested in that as well. But other than that, thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.
I hope you enjoy my mum's video. Have a great day.